This is my little friend, green beauty stone. I seldom see a green stone that I don't admire. And I have quite a few of them kicking around waiting to be carved. Green takes a wonderful polish. You can see on these lips. It's quite a thrilling thing to work for 2 years and then bring what you've accomplished into a public space and make it available for acclaim or derision, and also to assess your own direction as an artist. Some are unfinished and need more work. I carve stones primarily, although I began as a wood carver years ago. This show is comprised of 3 different things. There are stones that are carved and tumbled, polished, occasionally tinted. There are tree figures that are cast into bronze. In this show, I don't have any natural wood. Every tree figure in the show has been converted into bronze. I have a studio in Vermont with a foundry, and in the summer, in the last 6 or 8 years, I've experimented with burning trees out directly as if there were a category of lost wood casting as opposed to lost wax casting. And the third body of work here, which is 2 sculptures, are wood carvings, direct wood carvings in cherry wood. And that's something that I did 20 years ago, more than I do now, but I've turned to that during my Thursday wood carving classes at my studio in Upham's Corner in Dorchester. People often ask where I get the stone, and the answer is everywhere, because stone is everywhere. At least in New England, where the glaciers swept through during the last 100,000 years. We have stones from all over the world, and I go to the beaches primarily because they're clean and you can see what you're getting. In Vermont, I collect a lot of stones for their shape, but when you begin carving, you realize the patina that nature's put on them has prevented you from seeing exactly what you're getting. So it's best to get them where you can see the color. Not that color is as important as shape, but it's a part of the quality of the stone that's also a pleasure. This was an unusual stone that I spotted in my stone pile in Vermont this summer, this gray prow of this stone. And I went over and I picked it up and I began looking at it and so on, and I noticed that the bottom was flat, which surely was something that I did years ago. And I took it, I wonder why I did that, and I turned it upright like this, and lo and behold, I found a face that I had abandoned years ago. So this summer I carved this face and improved this face, put it in the tumbler, and now it's called Two-Faced Stone. The big stones that I carve on commissions, of course, I can't move myself, and that has to be engineered. So that involves, backhoes and trucks and cranes and machinery, which is nice because actually that's easier than picking up a 100-pound stone and trudging up the beach as I used to do. But I usually don't go to the effort of moving a stone unless I see something in it that already excites me. And quite often I'll carry a can of spray paint or a crayon where I can make 2 dots and a mouth. And that is the reminder back in the studio of where the head was when I saw the stone. And shape is the primary thing. It has to be an entire head. It has to have a prow the way the human face is. And it has to have some sort of quality of rectitude or stubbornness, which stones have. You know, they've been beaten and pushed and hurled out of volcanoes and, you know, sucked into glaciers and frozen, and they've been through a lot, and they've broken up, and they've formed this form that gives them a kind of purpose, a feeling of purpose. And that's the feeling I like to see, the sort of sense of character of the stone. And that's what impels the carving. This is a portrait of the Argentinian short story writer Jorge Borges, who my daughter Tess became very interested in and went to live in Buenos Aires and walked a little bit in his footsteps and read him and wrote about him and got me going on him again. A blind man, he worked as a librarian while he wrote these magnificent stories. So I've tried to make a blind but wide open mind in this pink stone. He was a very pockmarked man himself, not a handsome man, lived with his mother. But what an internal life he had, and I hope this stone shows it. My friend, Jorge Borges. As to what I carve, that really happens during the process of making a work of art. And every artist, painter or sculptor will tell you this. When you begin to act and head in a certain direction, the work of art begins to take on a character and starts to direct you a little bit and push you back and show you where you're wrong and entice you into areas that look promising, and you act again and you make a mistake and recover from the mistake. And gradually this dialogue ends in a completed work of art. It's an interesting stage because quite often you wonder, if I try this, will I have gone too far and will I be sorry? And that happens occasionally, not very much. I pretty much know when I'm done. It's when there are no mistakes that I see that are glaring, because that's another way to achieve a work of art. As you're in this dialogue with the stone, you also look for what the problem is, and you take the problem and you make it better than the best part of the stone, and you keep lifting up the weak part until the thing rises itself into a level of acceptability. This one is called round face stone, and a round stone tumbles beautifully, and I tumble it and carve it off and on until the shape is just right. In this case, I've plunged deeply into the mouth, and that's primarily for the color. This black hole that also exposes the mystery of the inside of a stone, which is a faraway place and hard to imagine. I raise the eyes and polish them also for color. But it's this notion that a stone has an internal life that's coming out that's most thrilling to me. Here's one I call quizzical stone. It's one of the rare cases where I use the grain itself of the stone to determine the position of the mouth. And you can see this quartz line splits, and I carve the mouth first, and the eyes followed. The tree figures are one piece of wood in general, cut from a tree. In this case, a manzanita tree in Arizona. It's the Native Americans called the tree of life, because when the tree falls, it becomes old and gray and gnarly and falls, and then just when you think it's dead, it shoots out a spurt of bright red growth. And this is one of those spurts, unbelievably electric and alive. I cut everything that isn't a figure away. Then I, like any bronze caster, I design my delivery system with wax feeders called sprues. Put the whole thing in an investment material, which is plaster and sand, the ancient investment material, and then heat it in an oven for days, slowly raising the temperature. I pour the new bronze back in, usually from the bottom, and it fills and vents out the top. And later I cut everything that isn't tree away, and then I put a patina on it, often trying to match the color of the original bark of brown. And that's done with a torch in one hand and various chemicals on a brush in the other hand. And you can see the level of detail. It's magnificent. You can get the bronze to flow to the tiniest little sprigs, but the casting itself looks precisely as the wood looked if it's successful. But I don't think of this as very different from the exploration into the stones. It's almost as though nature has mimicked our shape, or we have a common ancestor, certainly in trees. That's why so often you'll find a tree with a belly button, and quite often a penis, frankly, which is, in a tree's case, precisely the potential for new growth if some other part of the tree dies. Stones never have arms and legs, so I got to carve all the heads I never found easily when I was doing my tree figures. But to me, they're the same thing, really. A stone has the feeling of a head. It's much more cerebral, whereas a tree has the feeling of this explosion into space. It's this search for the light. It's this competition even underground for the minerals. And it's like the way we fight and stretch and move. Whereas a head is thinking. It has plenty of time. It rolls and endures all kinds of indignities and gradually forms itself into the character that it is. These two stones were found on the same day, on the same beach. And I like to imagine that they came from the same original rock, because they're nearly identical in their minerals. So at one time, it could have been 100 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago, they might have been joined together. And they seem to fit very nicely. It's possible they were joined just the way we placed them here. Two craggy old stones, possibly searching for each other for eons, united again. Regarding the tools in stone carving, you work from large to small, essentially, and that means larger tools. In the beginning I use big chainsaw-driven circular blades with a diamond edge, and I can slit in stones. And then using a big hammer with a big chisel, drop 15 or 20 pounds a swing of stone to the ground. And then we go to air hammers, and they come in all sizes too. The big pounders that take 2 hands, right down to the tiny little dental pounders. Grinders of all kinds, handheld grinders with diamond bits, little round burrs that can turn corners, tiny little saws, and down to the tiniest dental size bits and grinders. And then polishing is another thing. You need water and you need abrasives, right up to sort of a toothpaste-like abrasive, done at high speed with a buffing pad, and that'll bring out the color and the shine on the stone. So I use the polish for color primarily. And there are so many colors in stone: reds and greens and purples and yellows and grays and blacks that you can polish and bring up the colors you want. The tumbler I use early in the stones that are, let's say 100 pounds or less. I can put them in an enormous tumbler that rolls in Vermont.
Oh, it's a big one.
I have 3 different chambers, so I can do 3 different things at one time. Quite often I'll have quartz stones with very rough abrasive in one chamber, and I'll have ceramic chips that have another abrasive in them, so as they wear you get fresh abrasive. And then in the third one I'll have plastic beads and a tin oxide, something that'll polish stones that are farther along. But the main idea is, since I'm working with a natural stone, as soon as I begin to carve it, it begins to take on elements that are put in there by a human being, and they take the character of this rough stone away. So the tumbler is a way of having my cake and eating it too. It removes my marks, makes it old again, but now in the shape that I'm driving toward. Occasionally something happens in the tumbler that's totally unpredicted and unwanted. You know, it'll cleave a stone in half, or it'll refuse to tumble for a while and simply slide, and you'll erase one half of a head. And in the morning when you open the tumbler and pull it out, as I do every morning during the summer, sometimes it's a shock, but sometimes even the accidents or something later you're delighted with. And I tell my students, never be afraid of these mistakes and flaws, because you have to confront them just like any mistake in life, and use it as a way to find something charming or something that improves the work of art. Quite often it is those things that you initially resist or look like mistakes that lend charm to a work of art. This is another two-faced stone with a slightly different story. This is in the shape of a heart, and it's my twin brother and myself. We had a rocky relationship in our youth and are now very close. And it's kind of the psychological phenomenon of being a twin and all the games you play when you're little boys and the books you got about the tricks twins have played in literature and so on. And there's something very special about what a twin does to your own psyche. And this is a little probe in that direction. Two-faced stone, George and Joe, for my twin, who I love. This is a sculpture called Allen Stone, and it's a tribute to a wonderful man who died a month ago in perfect health in New York City. He was the founder of the Allen Stone Gallery, and he was so generous to me and so many artists, and particularly in the early stages of their careers, promoted us and helped us and bought our work. And it just has this far-sighted look of a man with a great deal of dignity and charm. Allen Stone. Vermont is an annual miracle for us. You know, my wife and I bought some land there when we were hippies back in the early 70s, and then we still have no telephone and cook on a campfire. I find free materials for sculpture, both rocks and trees, and also it's a place where sculptures go to die. They go back to the forest and they age patiently over the years, and slowly the land has filled up with magical places that are fun to walk to and remember. We built small cabins from timber that we harvested on the land. I have a bronze foundry and the tumbler and a big crane that I designed 5 years ago, which enables me to work on the tree figures at a much larger scale. Anything nature makes that's small that looks like us, it also makes large. And I've wanted for many years to get larger on the trees. And I can take a tree and spin it upside down and look at it. I can let it lay on the ground. I can ride up and look down on it so I can get some sense of what it'll look like in a show setting.
Fruitlands is a fascinating place. I remember going there as a young man as part of my Thoreauvian interest. I'm a huge fan of Thoreau and have been reading him all my life. And to know that he was walking on those very hills. So we've accomplished this 2-year exhibition of the large trees on the landscape where the transcendentalists walked and talked and envisioned a nature that talks to men and women. The main idea is that a bifurcated tree, which shows you the hips once I turn it upside down, the bifurcation and the two trunks rising, will now end up on the ground, and the roots underground will comprise the shoulders and the arms. The idea is to pick a tree, to dig gingerly underneath the ground in the roots to see what the shoulders might offer. And if it looks like a candidate, to go ahead and dig out on the shoulders until you come to the hands and see if they cooperate. And then whatever it takes to get the tree out is the next part. You have to sometimes build a road to get into it and get a crane in there and gently lift it up and lay it on a flatbed truck and then bring it up to where my crane is.